Tonight is personal to me, because tonight we discuss the first book, or rather, the first poem that most people in the Western world have heard of, whether they know it or not. The poem that gave us the template for the hero, the template for tragedy, the template for the question that every war story since has been asking. What is this actually for? What does glory cost? And is the cost worth paying? I am a chronicler. Books are my world, and this one is the oldest world I know. Homer's Iliad, composed approximately 2,800 years ago, still read today, the mother of all stories. Let us begin at the beginning, and the beginning, as always, begins with a question.
The honest answer to the question, who was Homer, is the most unsatisfying answer in literary history. We do not know. The ancient Greek tradition held that Homer was a blind poet, sometimes called the blind singer of Chios, who composed the Iliad and the Odyssey, the two foundational epics of Greek literature, sometime in the 8th century BC. This tradition was universal in the ancient world. It was also, by the standards of biographical evidence, entirely unverifiable.
No fewer than 7 ancient cities claim to be Homer's birthplace: Chios, Smyrna, Colophon, Salamis, Rhodes, Argos, and Athens. The ancient world itself knew this was suspicious. The satirist had it right when he noted that nobody claimed Homer while he was alive, and everyone wanted him after he was famous. Modern scholarship has divided into 3 broad camps. The Unitarians, sometimes called the analysts who reached synthesis, argue that Homer was indeed a single extraordinary poet who shaped both the Iliad and the Odyssey in something approaching their current form around the 8th century BC. They see consistent structural and thematic unity across each poem that suggests single authorship. The separatists argue that the Iliad and the Odyssey were composed by different people. The Iliad by an older, more martial poet, the Odyssey by a different sensibility, more interested in narrative cunning and domestic detail. This view has a long history and remains influential. The oral formulaic theorists follow the work of Milman Parry and Albert Lord, scholars who in the 1930s studied living oral epic traditions in Yugoslavia and showed that traditional oral epic is not memorized word for word, but performed extemporaneously using formulaic language. In this view, Homer is either the name of the bard who first wrote down a long oral tradition, or the name the tradition gave to its greatest practitioner, or simply an honorific label for the collective achievement of many generations of oral poets.
What Parry and Lord's fieldwork demonstrated in one of the great acts of comparative scholarship of the 20th century is that the features of Homer's poems that earlier scholars found puzzling, the repetition of formulaic phrases, the inconsistencies of detail, the variations in quality between passages, are exactly what you expect from a tradition of oral composition. The formulas are memory tools. The inconsistencies are the traces of different performance occasions. The variations in quality are what you get when one tradition produces both its best moments and its ordinary ones. Homer, in this view, is the name of a tradition rather than an individual, or at most, the name of the person who first imposed a written form on that tradition. What all camps agree on, the poems were written down sometime around the 8th century BC, and they draw on oral traditions significantly older. The linguistic evidence is remarkable. The poems contain a mixture of ancient forms, some dating to the Mycenaean Bronze Age, 1600 to 1200 BC, with later forms reflecting centuries of accumulated tradition. The formulaic phrases are among the most famous in world literature, precisely because their repeated use gave them an emblematic quality. Rosy-fingered dawn rises on every morning in the poem's world. Swift-footed Achilles is always swift, even when standing still. The wine-dark sea is always that color. These are not laziness. They are a poetic world being made consistent across thousands of lines by the weight of inherited phrase. The Iliad is described in every summary as a poem about the Trojan War. This description is accurate and misleading simultaneously. The Trojan War is the setting. The poem covers a few weeks in the war's 10th year. It does not begin at the beginning of the war, the judgment of Paris, the abduction of Helen, the gathering of the Greek forces, and it does not end at the end, the Trojan horse, the fall of Troy, the fate of the survivors. It begins with an argument between two Greek leaders, and it ends with a funeral. The poem's first word in ancient Greek is menace, wrath, or rage. Not just ordinary anger, but the consuming cosmic wrath of a great man whose honor has been violated. The opening invocation asks the muse to sing of the wrath of Achilles and of the countless sufferings it brought upon the Greeks. The poem is about what anger does. It is about what honor costs, what grief costs, and what it means to be the kind of person who would rather die than live with humiliation. Agamemnon takes Briseis, a captive woman who is Achilles' prize, to replace the captive he had been forced to return. In the heroic code of the poem's world, this is not primarily a personal insult. It is a public demonstration of subordination. You, Achilles, despite your superior martial ability, are mine to command and mine to take from. Achilles' response, withdrawal from the fighting, appeal to Zeus through his divine mother, the determination to see the Greeks suffer until they beg him back, is the response of someone for whom that insult is existential. I want to say something about Briseis before we go further. She is a captive. She was taken in a raid. She had no agency in any of this, not in being taken, not in being given as a prize, not in being transferred, not in the war being fought around her. The Iliad barely acknowledges her perspective. This is historically accurate for the world the poem depicts, and morally significant for the world we read it in. Modern retellings, particularly Pat Barker's The Silence of the Girls, have done essential work in filling in what Homer, by the conventions of his tradition, left out. I mention this not to condemn the Iliad, but to read it completely. The poem's moral heart is not Achilles, however. It is Hector. Hector is the Trojan champion, the greatest warrior on his side, the son of Priam the king, the husband of Andromache, the father of the infant Astyanax. He is, in every significant moral dimension, a better man than Achilles, more responsible, more loving, more fully present in his relationships with others. He does not fight for glory. He fights because Troy is his city and his family is in it. Book 6 of the Iliad, the scene of Hector's farewell to Andromache and Astyanax before returning to battle, is considered by many scholars the most emotionally powerful single scene in ancient literature. Hector holds his son. The baby is terrified by the horsehair crest of his father's helmet and screams. Hector laughs and takes off the helmet. He holds the child. He prays to Zeus that his son will be a great warrior when he grows up. He knows he will not live to see it. This scene is 2,800 years old, and it is recognizable to every parent who has ever held a frightened child. That recognition across 3 millennia is the definition of what literature at its greatest can do. Not to describe the past in its strangeness, but to reveal its closeness. The people who lived then were not so different from the people who live now. They loved their children. They feared losing what they loved. They went to wars they didn't choose for reasons larger than themselves. Homer knew this, and he carved it in language that does not decay. The Iliad's plot moves in a clear arc that mirrors its moral argument. Achilles withdraws. The Greeks suffer. Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, cannot bear the suffering and persuades Achilles to lend him his armor. Patroclus fights and dies. Achilles' grief transforms his wrath, turning it from Agamemnon to Hector. Achilles returns, kills Hector, and desecrates his body. The poem ends with Priam, Hector's father, coming alone to Achilles to beg for his son's body. The wrath arc is also a moral arc. Achilles begins the poem with his wrath directed at Agamemnon over a matter of personal honor. This is, in the poem's terms, legitimate. The wrong was real, but the consequence, the deaths of thousands of Greeks while he sits out, is disproportionate. The wrath grows beyond its cause. The death of Patroclus transforms, but does not heal the wrath. Achilles in grief is Achilles beyond human bounds. He fights like something inhuman. He cannot eat. He cannot stop. He drags a dead body around a tomb for days. This is wrath that has become self-consuming. The final scene, Priam and Achilles weeping together, is the moment the wrath finally breaks. Not through victory, not through satisfaction, but through recognition. Priam kisses the hands that killed his son. Achilles sees in Priam's grief his own grief. They are not enemies in this moment. They are two men who have each lost what they loved most.
The Iliad begins with wrath and ends with grief. There is no celebration of the war in the ending. There is no victory parade. There is a funeral for a man who should not have died, conducted by the man who killed him, in recognition that this is what war is, not glory, not meaning. Two fathers weeping. That is the Iliad's final word. Next Sunday, we go further. The other half of Homer's world, the Odyssey, and what the two poems together tell us about what the Greeks believed. And the week after, why we are still reading this, and what reading it now means. Every culture has its founding story. The Greeks had two, and they told them both honestly enough that the founding stories include betrayal and failure and grief, not just triumph. That honesty is itself a kind of greatness. The Iliad does not lie to you about what war is. It shows you the armor and the glory, yes, but it always shows you also the child frightened by the helmet, the father kissing the killer's hands, the grief that has no resolution. Come back Sunday. The story is far from over. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell us in the comments if you want something explored by the universe of imagination.